She stood in the hardware store parking lot, designer heels clicking against wet asphalt, staring at an industrial drilling machine that had chosen the worst possible moment to break down. Rain dripped from the brim of her hard hat onto blueprints. That represented millions of dollars in contracts, and her phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from contractors who needed answers she couldn't give. He was loading lumber into his weathered pickup truck, calloused hands moving with the efficiency of someone who had learned to make every moment count, when he heard the frustrated sigh that would change everything he thought he knew about helping. Strangers, about second chances, and about the unexpected places where hope takes root. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This isn't just a story about fixing a broken machine. It's about the bridges we build when we least expect to, the strength we find in the most unlikely partnerships, and the empires that rise not from concrete and steel, but from the courage to trust again. If stories of determination, quiet acts, of kindness, and the magic that happens when two worlds collide speak to your heart, you've found your place. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in Cedar Falls, Michigan. Michael Chen adjusted his tool belt as he walked through the aisles of Morrison's hardware, his 8-year-old daughter Sarah skipping beside him, her backpack bouncing with each step. The store smelled of sawdust and possibility, familiar scents. That had become as much a part of his weekly routine as Saturday morning pancakes and bedtime stories. He moved through the familiar maze of shelves with practiced ease, selecting screws here, checking prices there, while Sarah provided running commentary on everything from the display of garden hoses to the merits of different hammer weights. Michael had been coming to Morrison's for 3 years now, ever since he'd started his small handyman business after losing his job at the automotive plant. The transition hadn't been easy, going from a steady paycheck and benefits to the uncertainty of freelance work, all while raising Sarah alone, had tested every reserve of strength he thought he possessed. But there was something deeply satisfying about working with his hands, about taking broken things and making them whole again, that had sustained him through the lean months and sleepless nights. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, though the marriage had been over long before the papers were signed. Jessica had made it clear that small-town life wasn't for her, that Michael's dreams of building something modest but meaningful felt too much like settling. She wanted city lights and corporate ladders, wanted a life that moved fast and climbed high. Michael wanted stability for Sarah, wanted to be present for soccer games and school plays, wanted to build a business that would let him be both provider and father without sacrificing either role. So Jessica had moved to Chicago, visiting Sarah every other weekend when her schedule allowed, which was becoming less and less frequent as her marketing career demanded more of her time. Michael had learned to navigate the complex emotions of single parenthood, the way his heart could break and swell simultaneously watching Sarah adapt to their new reality with the resilience that children somehow possess in abundance. This particular Tuesday morning, they were picking up supplies for a bathroom renovation project that would pay the bills for the next 2 weeks. Michael had learned to stretch every dollar, to find creative solutions when clients had champagne dreams and beer budgets, to make his reputation one satisfied customer at a time. His business, Chen Home Services, operated out of his garage and relied entirely on word-of-mouth referrals and the kind of reliability that came from having no choice but to succeed. Sarah chatted about her upcoming science fair project while Michael calculated measurements in his head, double-checking his supply list against the cash in his wallet. They had developed an easy rhythm over the years, these father-daughter trips to the hardware store. Sarah would help him remember items he'd forgotten, offer suggestions with the serious demeanor of someone who considered herself an essential part of the business operations, and charm the elderly cashiers who had watched her grow from a shy 5-year-old into a confident third grader with opinions about everything. The morning sun streamed through the store's windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor as Michael loaded his cart with PVC pipes, joint compound, and the specialty tiles Mrs. Rodriguez had specifically requested for her guest bathroom. He moved with the unhurried precision of someone who had learned that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to callbacks, and callbacks ate into the slim profit margins that kept their small household running. At the checkout counter, old Pete Morrison rang up their purchases with the deliberate pace of someone who had been working retail since before barcode scanners existed. Pete had owned the store for 37 years, had seen the downtown area change from a thriving commercial district to a collection of empty storefronts and stubborn holdouts. But Morrison's hardware had survived because Pete understood that some things couldn't be replaced by big box stores or online retailers. He knew his customers by name, remembered their projects, and could recommend solutions based on decades of experience watching people try to fix, build, and improve the spaces they called home. "How's the Rodriguez job coming along?" Pete asked, his weathered hands moving items across the scanner with practiced efficiency. "Should be wrapped up by Thursday," Michael replied, counting out bills while Sarah organized the smaller items in a reusable bag they'd brought from home. "She's already asking about getting the master bathroom done next month." Pete nodded approvingly. "That's how you build a business, one happy customer at a time." He glanced down at Sarah, who was carefully arranging washers and screws in order of size. "And how's my favorite assistant contractor doing today?" Sarah beamed. "I'm helping Dad figure out the best way to waterproof the shower area. We watched 3 different YouTube videos last night to make sure we get it right." "That's the spirit," Pete chuckled, handing Michael his change. "You two make a good team." As they loaded their supplies into the back of Michael's 15-year-old Ford F-150, Sarah climbed into the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been riding in work trucks since she was tall enough to see over the dashboard. The truck was nothing fancy, but it was reliable, and Michael had learned to appreciate reliability above all else. The paint was faded, the interior showed signs of wear, but the engine ran strong and the bed was large enough to haul everything from lumber to lawnmowers. Michael had just started the engine when he heard it. The sound of metal grinding against metal, followed by a string of words that would have earned Sarah a lecture about appropriate language if she'd been listening. Instead, she was absorbed in a library book about marine biology, her legs swinging from the edge of the seat as she read about deep sea creatures with the same focus she applied to everything that captured her interest. Through the windshield, Michael could see a woman standing beside what looked like a professional-grade drilling machine mounted on a wheeled platform. Even from a distance, he could tell she was frustrated. Her posture radiated the kind of controlled tension that came from dealing with equipment failure at the worst possible moment. She was dressed in a way that suggested she was more accustomed to boardrooms than construction sites, but the hard hat perched on her head and the rolled-up blueprints in her hand indicated this wasn't a casual visit to the hardware store. Michael hesitated, his hand on the gear shift. He had learned to be cautious about getting involved in other people's problems, especially when those problems involved expensive equipment and strangers who might not appreciate unsolicited help. But something about the woman's obvious frustration, combined with the way she kept glancing at her phone as if time was running out, stirred something in him that he couldn't quite ignore. "Dad, why aren't we moving?" Sarah asked, looking up from her book. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Just a minute, sweetheart," Michael said, watching as the woman kicked the drilling machine with enough force to suggest she was beyond caring about professional decorum. "I think someone might need help." Sarah followed his gaze and immediately perked up. "Are you going to fix her machine?" "I don't know yet," Michael admitted. "Let me go see what's wrong." He turned off the engine and climbed out of the truck, leaving Sarah with strict instructions to stay put and keep reading. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and the distant smell of coffee from the diner 2 blocks away. As he approached the woman, Michael could see that her frustration was warranted. The drilling machine looked like it had given up mid-operation, with the drill bit jammed at an awkward angle and what appeared to be hydraulic fluid leaking from one of the connections. "Excuse me," Michael said, keeping his voice low and non-threatening. "I couldn't help but notice you're having some trouble. I'm Mike Chen, and I run a repair service. Mind if I take a look?" The woman looked up, and Michael was struck by the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she seemed to be calculating his motives and capabilities in the space of a heartbeat. She was probably in her mid-30s, with the kind of composed bearing that suggested she was used to being in charge of situations much more complex than a malfunctioning drill. Her clothes were expensive but practical, and despite the early hour, she carried herself with the alert energy of someone who had already been working for hours. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, extending a hand that was surprisingly strong. "And unless you're a certified technician for Bosch Industrial Equipment, I'm not sure there's much you can do. This machine is supposed to be drilling core samples for a foundation survey, and instead it's decided to become a very expensive paperweight." Michael smiled, recognizing the particular frustration that came from depending on tools that chose their own schedule for breaking down. "I'm not certified on that specific brand, but I've worked on similar hydraulic systems. Would you mind if I took a look? Worst case scenario, I can't fix it and you're in the same position you're in now." Elena hesitated, glancing at her phone again. "I've got a contractor meeting at 10:30, and I need these soil samples to provide the foundation specifications. If this machine doesn't work, I'm looking at a delay that could cost me a significant contract." "What kind of contract?" Michael asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to buy time while he assessed the machine's condition. "I'm bidding on a mixed-use development project," Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had invested everything in a single opportunity. "Residential and commercial space, about $40 million in total construction value. The kind of project that could establish my company as a serious player in the regional market." Michael whistled softly. "That's a serious project. What's your company?" "Rodriguez Construction Solutions," Elena said, then added with a trace of defensiveness, "I know it doesn't look like much right now, but I've been building toward this for 5 years. This contract would be our breakthrough." Michael nodded, understanding the particular pressure that came from being a small business owner, betting everything on the next opportunity. "Well, let's see if we can get your machine working. Sometimes the simplest problems have the most frustrating symptoms." He knelt beside the drilling machine, running his hands along the hydraulic lines and electrical connections with the methodical approach he'd learned from years of troubleshooting equipment that had been pushed beyond its limits. The machine was indeed a professional-grade piece of equipment, the kind that cost more than most people's cars and was designed to operate in conditions that would destroy consumer-grade tools. "When did it start acting up?" Michael asked, tracing a hydraulic line that seemed to have more play in it than it should. "About 20 minutes ago," Elena said, crouching beside him. "It was working fine, then it made this grinding noise and just stopped. I tried restarting it, but nothing." Michael found the problem almost immediately. A hydraulic coupling had worked itself loose, probably from vibration, causing the system to lose pressure. It was the kind of issue that would seem catastrophic to someone unfamiliar with hydraulic systems, but was actually relatively straightforward to fix with the right tools and knowledge. "Good news," Michael said, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "It's not broken, just disconnected. The hydraulic coupling worked itself loose. I can fix it, but I'll need to get some tools from my truck." Elena's relief was visible, though she tried to maintain her professional composure. "How long will it take?" "Maybe 15 minutes, assuming I don't run into any complications," Michael said, already walking toward his truck. The hardest part will be getting the coupling tight enough to hold pressure without over-tightening it and damaging the threads. As he gathered his tools, Michael was aware of Sarah watching him with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for nature documentaries. She had seen him work before, had helped him organize his tools and hand him supplies, but there was something different about watching him help a stranger solve a problem that seemed to matter so much. "Is the lady going to be okay?" Sarah asked as Michael selected wrenches and a small container of hydraulic fluid he kept for emergencies. "I think so," Michael said. "Sometimes people just need someone to take a look at their problem with fresh eyes. Like when my bike chain came off and I couldn't fix it, but you could?" "Exactly like that," Michael said, ruffling her hair. "Stay here and keep reading. I'll be right back." Elena was waiting beside the machine, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in rapid Spanish to someone who was clearly receiving updates about the delay. Michael caught enough of the conversation to understand that she was managing multiple moving parts of what sounded like a complex project, coordinating with contractors, suppliers, and what might have been investors or partners. When she ended the call, Michael had already positioned himself beside the machine and was working to access the loose coupling. "Family business?" he asked, partly to make conversation and partly because he'd heard the particular tone people used when talking to relatives about work crises. "In a way," Elena said, watching him work with the focused attention of someone who was used to understanding how things operated. "My father started Rodriguez Construction 30 years ago. Traditional residential work, mostly. He built a good reputation in the Latino community, but he never wanted to expand beyond what he could manage personally." Michael nodded, understanding the particular challenge of inheriting a business that had been built around one person's vision and capabilities. "And you want to take it in a different direction?" "I want to take it where it should have gone 20 years ago," Elena said, her voice carrying both respect for her father's work and frustration with his limitations. "Dad was content to build one house at a time, to work with families in the neighborhood, to keep everything small and manageable. But I've got an MBA. I understand markets and financing, and I can see opportunities he never considered." "Like $40 million mixed-use developments," Michael said, working to loosen the coupling without stripping the threads. "Exactly. But first I have to prove I can handle the technical side as well as the business side. That's why I'm out here at 7 in the morning taking soil samples myself instead of sending a crew." Michael glanced up at her, surprised by the admission. Most contractors he knew would have delegated this kind of work to employees or subcontractors, especially if they were trying to project an image of being ready for major projects. "You don't have people who can handle this." Elena's smile was rueful. "I have people, but they're all busy with 3 different residential projects that are keeping the lights on while I chase this commercial contract. And honestly, I need to understand every aspect of this project myself. If I'm going to convince investors that Rodriguez Construction can handle major commercial work, I need to know the technical details as well as the financial projections." "That's smart," Michael said, applying steady pressure to the coupling. "A lot of contractors get burned because they bid on projects they don't fully understand." "Exactly. My father taught me that you never promise something you can't deliver. And you never deliver something you don't understand." Elena paused, watching Michael work. "What about you? How long have you been running your business?" 3 years, Michael said, feeling the coupling begin to thread properly. "Started after I got laid off from the Ford plant. Wasn't exactly my plan, but sometimes life pushes you in directions you didn't know you needed to go." "And your daughter?" "She seems comfortable with the work environment." Michael smiled, thinking about Sarah waiting in the truck with her marine biology book. "She's been my unofficial assistant since day one. Keeps me organized, helps me remember appointments, and she's got a better eye for color matching than I do." "That's wonderful," Elena said, and Michael could hear genuine warmth in her voice. Not many kids get to see their parents work the way she does. It's not always easy, Michael admitted, checking the coupling's alignment. Single parenting and running a business at the same time means a lot of juggling. But she's tough, and she seems to enjoy being part of the process. Single parenting? Elena asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, that's not my business. It's okay, Michael said, tightening the coupling with careful precision. Divorced 2 years ago. Sarah's mom moved to Chicago for her career, so it's just us now. Elena nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. That's gotta be challenging. Some days more than others, Michael said, standing up and wiping his hands. But we make it work. Okay, let's see if this fixes your problem. He activated the machine's hydraulic system, and both of them watched as pressure built smoothly through the lines. The drill bit responded properly to the controls, rotating and extending without the grinding noise that had indicated the earlier problem. Elena's relief was obvious, though she maintained her professional composure. That's incredible, she said, testing the machine's functions. How much do I owe you? Michael was already packing up his tools. Don't worry about it. Took me 10 minutes and probably saved you hours of downtime. Consider it a professional courtesy. Elena stared at him, clearly surprised. I can't just let you fix my equipment for free. This machine is worth $30,000, and you just saved me from missing a critical deadline. And I was happy to help, Michael said, shouldering his tool bag. Sometimes the best payment is knowing you solved someone's problem. But Elena was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through what looked like a contact list. What did you say your business was called? Chen Home Services, Michael said, suddenly self-conscious about his small-scale operation in the context of Elena's ambitious commercial projects. And you do what kind of work? Handyman services mostly. Bathroom renovations, kitchen updates. Basic electrical and plumbing, that kind of thing. Elena looked up from her phone, studying him with the same calculating attention she'd shown earlier. What about larger projects? Have you ever worked on commercial construction? Michael hesitated, unsure where the conversation was heading. I've done some work on small commercial properties. Retail build-outs, office renovations, nothing major. But you understand construction systems, obviously. Hydraulics, electrical, plumbing. I understand how things work, yes, Michael said carefully. But I'm not sure what you're getting at. Elena saved something on her phone, then looked up at him with the expression of someone who had just made a decision. I'm getting at the fact that you just diagnosed and fixed a problem in 15 minutes that would have taken a certified technician 2 hours and a service call fee. That suggests you understand systems and problem solving at a level that most contractors don't. I appreciate that, Michael said, but I'm not sure. I'm about to start the biggest project of my career. Elena interrupted, her voice carrying the intensity of someone who had been waiting for an opportunity to present itself. I need reliable people who can think on their feet, who understand that every delay costs money, and who can solve problems instead of just identifying them. Michael felt a stirring of something he hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of work that might be more than just paying the bills. What kind of work are you talking about? Subcontracting, initially, Elena said, her words coming faster as she warmed to her subject. I'll need electrical rough-in, plumbing systems, finish carpentry, coordinating with specialty contractors. The kind of work that requires someone who can manage multiple aspects of a project simultaneously. That sounds like a big step up. From bathroom renovations, Michael said, though he could feel his interest growing despite his caution. It is, Elena agreed. But based on what I just watched, I think you could handle it. The question is whether you want to. Michael looked back toward his truck, where Sarah was still reading, completely absorbed in her book about deep-sea creatures. The regular rhythm of his current work provided security, predictability, The kind of steady income that let him plan for school supplies and soccer uniforms, and the 1,000 small expenses that came with raising a child. But it also felt limiting, like he was capable of more than he was being asked to do. "I'd need to know more about what you're proposing," Michael said finally. "Timeline, scope of work, how it would fit with my existing commitments." Elena smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her all morning. "How about this? I'm meeting with the general contractor and the project architects this afternoon at 2. Would you be interested in sitting in on that meeting? Not as a commitment, just as a way to learn more about what the project involves." Michael found himself nodding before he'd fully thought through the implications. "I could do that. Where?" "Rodriguez Construction Office, 422 Industrial Boulevard. It's the building with the blue awning, right next to the tire shop." "I know where that is," Michael said, though he'd never paid attention to the businesses in that particular strip of industrial buildings. "Good," Elena said, checking her phone again. "The meeting should last about an hour, and afterward I can give you a better sense of what kind of work might be available." As Michael walked back to his truck, he felt the particular mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with unexpected opportunities. Sarah looked up from her book as he climbed into the driver's seat, her expression curious. "Did you fix the lady's machine?" she asked. "I did," Michael said, starting the engine. "And she invited me to a meeting this afternoon about a construction project. A big one?" "Maybe," Michael said, pulling out of the parking lot. "We'll see." As they drove toward the Rodriguez job site, Michael found himself thinking about the conversation with Elena, about the possibility of work that might challenge him in ways he hadn't experienced since leaving the plant. The steady routine of handyman services had served its purpose, had given him the flexibility to be present for Sarah while building a reputation for reliability. But there was something appealing about the idea of working on a project that mattered, that required coordination and problem-solving, and the kind of teamwork he'd missed since his factory days. Sarah chattered about her book, describing the feeding habits of anglerfish and the pressure adaptations of deep-sea creatures with the enthusiasm she brought to all her interests. Michael listened with half his attention, the other half occupied with calculations about scheduling and cash flow and the risk of taking on work that was outside his established comfort zone. The Rodriguez bathroom renovation proceeded smoothly, with Michael working with the focused efficiency that came from years of experience. Managing time and materials on a tight budget, Mrs. Rodriguez was pleased with the progress, asking questions about the waterproofing process and praising Michael's attention to detail. She was Elena's aunt, though Michael didn't learn this until later, and she had the same direct manner of speaking, and the same appreciation for work that was done properly the first time. As he worked, Michael found himself thinking about Elena's offer about the possibility of expanding his business beyond its current scope. The idea was both exciting and terrifying, representing the kind of professional growth he'd imagined, but never quite believed was possible. He'd built Chen Home Services on the foundation of being reliable and available, of solving problems that other contractors considered too small to bother with. But perhaps that same approach could work on larger projects if he could find the right opportunity and the right partners. By noon, he had finished the major work on the bathroom and was beginning the cleanup process that would leave the space ready for Mrs. Rodriguez to use while the grout cured. Sarah had spent the morning alternating between reading and helping organize tools, her presence a comforting constant in the rhythm of the workday. "Dad," she said as he packed up his tools, "are you nervous about the meeting this afternoon?" Michael looked up, surprised by the perceptiveness of the question. "A little bit." "Why? You've been humming the same song for 2 hours," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "You only do that when you're thinking about something important." Michael smiled, recognizing the truth in her observation. "I guess I am a little nervous. This could be a chance to do different kinds of work, bigger projects. But it would also mean some changes to how we do things." Good changes or bad? Changes? I don't know yet, Michael said honestly. That's what we're going to find out. As they drove home for lunch, Michael found himself paying attention to the commercial buildings they passed, noticing the construction details and maintenance needs with the eye of someone who might soon be working on similar projects. The possibility of expanding his business felt both natural and daunting, like taking a step into a larger world that had always existed but had somehow remained just out of reach. The Rodriguez construction office was exactly what Michael had expected, a modest building that spoke of steady work and practical priorities rather than flashy success. The parking lot was gravel, the siding was functional rather than decorative, and the sign was simple blue lettering on a white background. But the building was well maintained, the windows were clean, and the landscaping suggested someone who paid attention to details. Sarah had opted to wait in the truck with her book and a snack, content to continue her exploration of marine biology while Michael attended the meeting. He checked his appearance in the rearview mirror, straightening his collar and running a hand through his hair, then walked toward the building with the kind of determined calm he'd learned to project when he wasn't entirely sure what he was walking into. The interior of the Rodriguez construction office was as straightforward as the exterior functional furniture, project photos on the walls, and the busy atmosphere of a business that was focused on work rather than impression. Elena looked up from a conference table where she was reviewing blueprints with two other people, her expression brightening when she saw Michael. "Mike, perfect timing," she said, standing to greet him. "I'd like you to meet David Chen, no relation, I assume, our project architect, and Maria Santos, who represents the general contractor we'll be working with." Michael shook hands with both, trying to read the dynamics of the meeting he was stepping into. David Chen was probably in his 50s, with the rumpled appearance of someone who thought primarily in terms of structural problems and design solutions. Maria Santos was younger, maybe Elena's age, with the confident bearing of someone who was used to managing large projects and the people who worked on them. "Elena tells me you solved her equipment problem this morning," Maria said, her tone suggesting she was reserving judgment about Michael's qualifications for whatever they were discussing. "Just a loose coupling," Michael said, settling into the chair Elena indicated. "Nothing dramatic." "But you diagnosed it quickly and fixed it properly," Elena said, spreading blueprints across the table. "Which is exactly the kind of problem-solving ability we need on this project." The blueprints showed a complex mixed-use development residential units on the upper floors, commercial space at ground level, underground parking, and infrastructure that would require coordination between multiple contractors and trades. Michael studied the drawings with growing respect for the scope of work involved, understanding why Elena had described it as a breakthrough project. "The challenge," David explained, pointing to various sections of the blueprint, "is that we're working with a compressed timeline and a fixed budget. The residential units need to be ready for occupancy by next September, and the commercial space needs to be functional by December. That doesn't leave much margin for delays or cost overruns. Which is why we need contractors who can think on their feet," Maria added, her eyes on Michael. "Elena says you run a handyman service. Have you ever worked on a project of this scale?" Michael considered his answer carefully. "Not directly, no. But I've worked on smaller commercial projects, and I understand construction systems well enough to know that the principles scale up. The main differences are coordination and scheduling." "Exactly," Elena said, her voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who had found validation for a decision she'd already made. "And those are learnable skills for someone who already understands how to solve problems efficiently." Maria looked skeptical. "What's your current capacity? Are you looking to hire additional crew? Or would you be working as a subcontractor?" "That depends on what kind of work we're talking about," Michael said, trying to project confidence while acknowledging the limitations of his current operation. "I've got reliable relationships with electricians, plumbers, and specialty contractors. For the right project, I could scale up my crew. The right project, Maria repeated, making notes on a legal pad. And what would make this the right project for you? Michael thought about Sarah waiting in the truck, about the steady rhythm of bathroom renovations and kitchen updates that had sustained them for 3 years, about the possibility of work that might challenge him in ways he hadn't experienced since leaving the plant. A project where I could contribute to something significant, where the work was challenging enough to make me better at what I do, and where I could build relationships with people who understand that quality work takes time and attention. Elena smiled, clearly pleased with his answer. David nodded approvingly. Maria continued to look skeptical, but Michael sensed that skepticism was her professional default rather than a personal judgment. Here's what I'm thinking, Elena said, spreading additional drawings across the table. We need someone to coordinate the interior systems work, electrical rough-in, plumbing, HVAC coordination, and the kind of problem-solving that comes up when you're trying to make everything fit together properly. That's specialized work, Maria said. Are you confident you can handle the technical requirements? I'm confident I can learn what I need to learn, Michael said. And I'm confident I can recognize when I need to bring in someone with more specialized knowledge. That's actually more important than knowing everything yourself, David said, surprising Michael. The best contractors are the ones who know their limitations and plan accordingly. Elena pulled out a folder and handed Michael a set of specifications. These are the technical requirements for the interior systems. Take them home, review them, and let me know if you think this is something you want to pursue. Michael accepted the folder, feeling the weight of possibility and responsibility. What's the timeline for making a decision? I need to submit final contractor recommendations by Friday, Elena said. So you'd have until Thursday to decide. And if I say yes? Then we start with a smaller test project, Maria said, her tone suggesting she was warming to the idea despite her initial skepticism. There's a small commercial renovation that would let us see how you handle coordination and scheduling before we commit to the larger project. Michael looked at the blueprints spread across the table, at the possibility of work that would require him to grow beyond his current limitations, at the chance to be part of something significant. I'd like to try, he said simply. Elena's smile was brilliant. Good, let's see what you can do. As Michael walked back to his truck, the folder of specifications under his arm, he felt the particular mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with stepping into unknown territory. Sarah looked up from her book as he climbed into the driver's seat, her expression curious. How did it go? She asked. Good, I think, Michael said, starting the engine. They offered me a chance to work on a big construction project. Ah, you going to do it? Michael looked at the folder beside him, at the blueprints and specifications that represented a level of work he'd never attempted. I don't know yet. What do you think? Sarah considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. I think you should try. You're really good at fixing things, and maybe it's time to fix bigger things. Michael smiled, struck by the simple wisdom of her perspective. Maybe you're right. As they drove home, Michael found himself thinking about the meeting, about Elena's confidence in his abilities, about the possibility of work that might challenge him in ways he hadn't experienced in years. The folder of specifications sat beside him like a promise and a challenge, representing the kind of opportunity that came along rarely and demanded a response that was both practical and courageous. The afternoon sun slanted through the windshield as they pulled into their driveway, and Michael felt the familiar satisfaction of a day's work completed and the anticipation of decisions that would shape the days to come. Sarah gathered her books and backpack, chattering about the marine biology project she was planning for the science fair, while Michael carried the folder of specifications into the house with the careful attention of someone who understood that some documents had the power to change everything. That evening, after Sarah had finished her homework and gone to bed, Michael spread the project specifications across his kitchen table and began to read. The technical requirements were complex but not incomprehensible, demanding skills he possessed and knowledge he could acquire. More importantly, they represented the kind of work that would require him to grow, to learn, to become more than he currently was. As he studied the drawings and specifications, Michael found himself thinking about Elena's story, about her determination to expand her father's business beyond its traditional boundaries, about the courage it took to bet everything on a single opportunity. He thought about Sarah, about the example he was setting for her, about the difference between the safety of familiar limitations and the risk of pursuing something that mattered. The specifications were detailed and demanding, but they were also achievable. The timeline was compressed but not impossible. The coordination requirements were complex but not beyond his capabilities. Most importantly, the project represented the kind of work that would challenge him to become better at what he did, to solve problems he'd never encountered, to build relationships with people who shared his commitment to quality and reliability. By the time he finished reading, Michael had made his decision. The folder of specifications wasn't just a job opportunity, it was an invitation to step into a larger version of himself, to discover what he was capable of when challenged by work that demanded everything he had to offer. He would call Elena in the morning and accept her offer. Chen Home Services was about to become something more than a handyman business, and Michael was ready to discover what that something might be. Outside, the Michigan night was quiet and still, filled with the kind of peaceful darkness that made plans feel possible and dreams feel achievable. Michael turned off the kitchen light and headed toward bed, the specifications safely stored in his briefcase, his mind already working through the logistics of scaling up his operation and the excitement of work that would require him to grow beyond his current boundaries. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and the beginning of a professional relationship that might change everything he thought he knew about his capabilities and his future. But tonight, he was content to rest in the satisfaction of a decision made with careful thought and hopeful courage, knowing that Sarah would be proud of him for choosing to try something bigger than he had ever attempted before. The next morning arrived with the crisp clarity that often follows important decisions. Michael woke before his alarm, his mind already working through the practical implications of accepting Elena's offer. Over coffee and Sarah's favorite breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, he found himself looking at his daughter with new awareness of the example he was setting, the way his choices would shape her understanding of what was possible when opportunity knocked. "Dad, you're doing that thing again," Sarah said, pausing between bites of toast. "What thing?" "The thinking thing, where you look like you're solving a really hard math problem in your head." Michael smiled, recognizing the accuracy of her observation. "I'm thinking about the construction project, about whether I'm ready to take on something that big." Sarah considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "Are you scared?" "A little bit," Michael admitted. "It's a lot bigger than anything I've done before." "But you fixed the lady's machine when she couldn't fix it herself," Sarah pointed out. "And you always figure out how to fix things that are broken." "That's true," Michael said, struck by the simple logic of her perspective. "Sometimes the things that seem scariest are just bigger versions of things we already know how to do." After dropping Sarah at school, Michael drove to Elena's office with the folder of specifications and a head full of questions about timelines, logistics, and the practical details of scaling up his operation. The morning traffic was light, giving him time to organize his thoughts and prepare for what he suspected would be a detailed discussion about capabilities, expectations, and the kind of professional relationship that would be required to make the project successful. Elena was waiting for him in her office, a cup of coffee in one hand and a phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapid Spanish to someone who was clearly receiving updates about multiple moving parts of her expanding business. She gestured for Michael to sit while she finished the call, and he used the time to study the photos and certificates on her walls, evidence of a career built on steady growth and increasing ambition. When she ended the call, Elena turned to him with the focused attention of someone who had learned to make every conversation count. "I'm hoping you're here to tell me you're interested in the project." "I am," Michael said, setting the folder on her desk. "I've reviewed the specifications, and I think I can handle the coordination requirements. But I have some questions about timeline and logistics." "Good," Elena said, settling back in her chair. "Questions mean you're thinking seriously about the practical aspects. What do you need to know?" Michael pulled out the notes he'd made while reviewing the specifications. "The timeline shows interior systems work starting in 6 weeks. That's not much time to hire additional crew and coordinate with the specialty contractors you'll need." "That's true," Elena said. "But it's also realistic given the overall project schedule. Are you thinking it's not enough time?" "I'm thinking it's tight, but manageable if I start lining up contractors now," Michael said. "I'll need to know what kind of budget I'm working with for labor and materials." Elena opened a file folder and pulled out a detailed budget breakdown. "These are the numbers we're working with. Labor costs are competitive with current market rates, and materials will be purchased through established suppliers with negotiated pricing." Michael studied the numbers, recognizing that they represented significantly more money than he'd ever managed on a single project. The budget was substantial but not extravagant, requiring careful planning and efficient execution to maintain profitability while delivering quality work. "This is workable," he said finally. "But I'll need to establish relationships with suppliers and subcontractors pretty quickly." "I can help with that," Elena said. "Rodriguez Construction has been working with local suppliers for 30 years. I can introduce you to the people who understand our standards and expectations." "That would be helpful," Michael said, feeling some of his anxiety ease. "What about the test project Maria mentioned? When would that start?" Elena smiled, clearly pleased that he was asking the right questions. "Next week, if you're ready. It's a small office renovation, about 2,000 square feet, but it involves coordination between electrical, plumbing, and finish work. Exactly the kind of project that will let us see how you handle multiple contractors and compressed timelines." "I'm ready," Michael said, surprised by his own certainty. "What do I need to do to get started?" Elena handed him another folder, this one containing contracts, insurance requirements, and vendor contact information. "Review these tonight, get your insurance updated if necessary, and we can start Monday morning." As Michael left Elena's office, he felt the particular mixture of excitement and responsibility that came with accepting a challenge that would require him to grow beyond his current limitations. The folders under his arm represented more than just work. They represented the possibility of becoming something more than he had allowed himself to imagine. The test project began the following Monday in a modest office building that was being converted from insurance offices to a co-working space for freelancers and small businesses. The work was straightforward, updating electrical systems, installing new plumbing for a small kitchenette, and coordinating with flooring contractors to ensure everything was completed on schedule and within budget. Michael arrived at the job site before 7, taking time to walk through the space and visualize the workflow before the other contractors arrived. The building was older but well-maintained, with good bones and the kind of solid construction that made renovation work predictable rather than constantly surprising. Elena arrived at 7:30, dressed in work clothes and carrying a thermos of coffee that suggested she was planning to stay involved in the day-to-day progress. "How does it look?" she asked, surveying the space with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to spot problems before they became crises. "Good," Michael said, showing her the workflow plan he'd sketched out. "Electrical rough-in first, then plumbing, then coordination with the flooring crew. If everything goes smoothly, we should be finished by Friday." And if everything doesn't go smoothly? Michael smiled, appreciating the realism of the question. Then we adapt and solve problems as they come up. But I've built some buffer time into the schedule for unexpected issues. The week proceeded with the kind of steady progress that came from careful planning and experienced execution. Michael coordinated with the electrical contractor to ensure the new circuits were properly integrated with the existing system. Worked with the plumber to install the kitchenette plumbing without disrupting the building's main water supply, and managed the timing so that the flooring crew could work efficiently without interference from the other trades. Elena stopped by the job site daily, not to micromanage but to observe how Michael handled the coordination requirements and unexpected challenges that inevitably arose. She watched him troubleshoot a conflict between the electrical and plumbing work, mediate a scheduling dispute between contractors, and solve a problem with the flooring installation that required creative thinking and diplomatic communication. By Thursday afternoon, the project was ahead of schedule and under budget, with quality work that met Elena's standards for attention to detail and professional execution. Michael was cleaning up his tools when Elena approached him with the expression of someone who had reached a conclusion. "I'm impressed," she said simply. "You handled the coordination requirements better than contractors with twice your experience." "It helped that you connected me with reliable people," Michael said, packing his tools with the methodical approach that had become second nature. "Good contractors make coordination easier. Good contractors respond well to good coordination." Elena corrected. "You made their jobs easier, which made them more efficient and more cooperative." Michael looked around the renovated space, taking satisfaction in work that had been completed properly and on time. "So what's next?" Elena handed him a business card with her contact information and a handwritten note. "Next is the big project, assuming you're still interested." Michael looked at the card, recognizing it as a formal invitation to step into the kind of work that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his capabilities. "I'm interested." "Good," Elena said, shaking his hand with the firmness of someone sealing a deal. "Because I think we're going to make a great team." As Michael drove home that evening, he found himself thinking about the week's work, about the satisfaction of coordinating multiple contractors toward a common goal, about the possibility of professional growth that would require him to become more than he currently was. The test project had been successful, but more importantly, it had given him confidence that he could handle the larger challenges that lay ahead. Sarah was waiting for him with homework spread across the kitchen table and questions about his day that demonstrated her growing understanding of the work he did. As he described the week's progress, Michael realized that his professional growth was also teaching her about the rewards of accepting challenges, the satisfaction of solving problems, and the importance of building relationships based on competence and reliability. The big project would start in 3 weeks, and Michael spent the intervening time preparing for work that would require him to coordinate with more contractors, manage larger budgets, and solve problems on a scale he'd never attempted. But the test project had given him confidence that the principles he'd learned over years of smaller jobs would scale up to meet the demands of more complex work. Chen Home Services was about to become something more than a handyman business, and Michael was ready to discover what that something might be. The folder of specifications for the mixed-use development sat on his kitchen table like a promise and a challenge, representing work that would push him to grow beyond his current boundaries while building something significant and lasting. Outside, the Michigan spring was settling into the rhythm of longer days and warmer weather, and Michael felt the particular satisfaction that came from knowing he was ready for the challenges ahead. Tomorrow would bring new problems to solve, new relationships to build, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the biggest risk was not taking a chance on yourself when the opportunity presented itself. The future felt full of possibility, and Michael was ready to meet it with the same careful preparation and determined Execution that had carried him through 3 years of building a business from nothing but tools, skills, and the willingness to show up every day ready to work. The construction empire might belong to Elena, but Michael was about to discover what he was capable of building when given the chance to try something bigger than he had ever imagined possible. The mixed-use development project officially began. On a Monday morning in late May, with Michael arriving at the construction site before sunrise to survey the scope of work that would define the next 8 months of his professional life. The lot was larger than he had imagined from the blueprints, stretching across nearly 3 acres of former industrial land that had been cleared and graded for the foundation work that would begin within the week. Standing at the edge of what would become Cedar Falls' most ambitious commercial development, Michael felt the weight of responsibility settling around his shoulders like a familiar but heavier coat. Elena's truck pulled up beside his at exactly 6:30, and she emerged carrying a hard hat, a thermos of coffee, and a clipboard thick with permits, schedules, and the kind of detailed planning that separated successful projects from expensive disasters. She moved with the purposeful energy of someone who had been awake for hours, coordinating with suppliers, checking weather forecasts, and managing the dozen moving parts that had to align perfectly for the project to stay on schedule and within budget. Sarah noticed the change in his energy and focus during their evening conversations. Instead of the tired satisfaction that had characterized his handyman work, he displayed the engaged exhaustion of someone who was being challenged by work that demanded growth and learning. She listened to his descriptions of coordination, challenges, and technical problems with the attention of someone who was beginning to understand that her father's professional development was opening new possibilities for their future. "It sounds like you're really good at this," she said one evening as they worked together on her homework. "I think I am," Michael replied, surprised by his own confidence. "It's different from the handyman work, but it uses a lot of the same skills in new ways. And you like it?" Michael considered the question carefully. The work was more demanding than anything he had done before, but it was also more engaging and more significant. He was part of a team that was building something important, using skills that challenged him to grow beyond his current limitations, working with people who respected his contributions and shared his commitment to quality and reliability. "I like it," he said. "It's the kind of work that makes me want to get up early and tackle whatever problems come up during the day." The second week of interior systems work brought the first major coordination challenge when the HVAC contractor discovered that the building's planned heating and cooling system would require modifications to the electrical capacity that hadn't been anticipated during the design phase. The problem required immediate coordination between the electrical and HVAC contractors, modifications to the building's electrical system, and adjustments to the installation schedule. Michael handled the crisis with the calm efficiency he had learned from watching Elena manage similar problems during the foundation phase. He organized a meeting with the affected contractors, reviewed the technical requirements for the system modifications, and developed a solution that would resolve the problem without significantly impacting the overall project timeline. Elena observed his management of the crisis from a distance, available for consultation if needed, but allowing him to handle the problem-solving and coordination responsibilities. Her confidence in his abilities was evident, but she also monitored the situation carefully to ensure that the solution was technically sound and practically feasible. "You handled that well," she said after the contractors had agreed on a solution and adjusted their schedules accordingly. "Crisis management is one of the most important skills for construction coordination, and you're developing good instincts for it." Michael felt the satisfaction of successful problem-solving, but he also recognized that the crisis had tested his ability to manage complex situations under pressure. The success of the solution would depend on his ability to monitor the implementation and ensure that the modifications were completed correctly and on schedule. The resolution required 2 additional days of electrical work and coordination, with the heaviest installation, but it was manageable within the overall project timeline. More importantly, the way Michael handled the crisis demonstrated to Elena and the other contractors that he was becoming a skilled professional who could be trusted with significant responsibilities. As the interior systems work progressed, Michael found himself increasingly involved in the strategic planning aspects of the project. Elena included him in meetings with the general contractor, asked for his input on scheduling and coordination decisions, and gradually transferred more responsibility for the day-to-day management of the interior systems work. "You're becoming an essential part of the project," she observed during one of their weekly planning sessions. "The contractors trust your judgment, the scheduling is working smoothly, and the quality of work is meeting our standards." Michael felt the particular satisfaction that came from recognition of professional competence, but he also understood that his success was based on skills he had developed over years of smaller projects and the systematic approach to learning that Elena had provided. The transition from handyman to construction professional hadn't happened overnight, but it had happened more rapidly than he had thought possible. The 3rd week brought the installation of the building's main electrical panel and the coordination of electrical connections throughout the residential and commercial spaces. Michael's role during this phase was central to the project's success, requiring him to coordinate with multiple electrical contractors, ensure that the installations met code requirements, and maintain communication with other contractors whose work depended on the electrical system's completion. The work was complex and demanding, but Michael approached it with the confidence that came from careful preparation and systematic skill development. He had learned to read electrical blueprints, understand code requirements, and coordinate with inspectors and contractors who were working on interconnected systems. Elena observed his management of the electrical installation with the attention of someone who was evaluating his readiness for even greater responsibilities. The electrical work was critical to the project's success, and Michael's ability to coordinate the installation successfully would determine whether he was ready for the leadership role she was beginning to envision for him. "The electrical work is the foundation for everything else," she explained as they reviewed the installation progress. "If we get this right, the rest of the interior systems work will proceed smoothly. If we have problems here, they'll cascade through the entire project." Michael understood the importance of the electrical installation, but he also felt confident in his ability to manage the coordination requirements successfully. The contractors were experienced and reliable, the specifications were clear and technically sound, and the coordination protocols he had developed were working effectively. The electrical installation was completed on schedule and within budget, with quality work that met all code requirements and provided the foundation for the other interior systems. Michael's coordination of the work was recognized by the contractors and inspectors as professional and effective, and Elena's evaluation of his performance was clearly positive. "You've proven that you can handle complex coordination responsibilities," she said as they reviewed the completed electrical work. "I'm impressed by your ability to manage multiple contractors and technical systems simultaneously." The success of the electrical installation marked a turning point in Michael's involvement in the project. Elena began including him in meetings with investors and city officials, asked for his input on strategic decisions about the project's development, and gradually transferred more responsibility for the overall management of the interior systems work. "I'm thinking about expanding Rodriguez Construction's capacity to handle multiple large projects simultaneously," she said during one of their planning sessions. "Would you be interested in taking on a leadership role in that expansion?" Michael felt the particular excitement that came with recognition of professional competence and the opportunity for career growth that would challenge him to develop new skills and capabilities. The question represented more than just a job offer. It was an invitation to become part of Elena's vision for building a construction company that could handle the most complex and significant projects in the region. "I'm interested," he said, meaning it completely. "What kind of leadership role are you thinking about?" Elena smiled, clearly pleased by his response. "I'm thinking about a role that would combine your technical skills with your coordination abilities. Someone who could manage the interior systems, work on multiple projects simultaneously, train other contractors in coordination protocols, and help expand our capacity to handle larger and more complex projects." The conversation continued late into the evening, with Elena outlining her vision for the company's expansion and Michael asking questions about the responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities that would come with a leadership role in a growing construction company. By the time they finished talking, both of them understood that they were discussing more than just a business relationship. They were planning a partnership that would combine their complementary skills and shared commitment to building something significant and lasting. The interior systems work continued to progress smoothly, with Michael's coordination and Elena's oversight ensuring that the electrical, plumbing, and vac installations were completed according to schedule and quality standards. The project was approaching the halfway point, and the building was beginning to take shape as a complex that would serve the community for decades, while establishing Rodriguez Construction as a company capable of handling the most ambitious projects in the region. Michael's role in the project had evolved from observer to coordinator to leader, and he was beginning to understand that his professional development was opening possibilities he had never imagined when he first started his handyman business. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been systematic and supported by Elena's commitment to developing his capabilities while challenging him to grow beyond his current limitations. As the work week ended, Michael drove home with the satisfaction of someone who had found work that challenged him to become more than he had thought possible. "The foundation work sets the stage for everything else," she explained as they watched the concrete pour proceed with clockwork precision. "If we get the infrastructure right at this stage, the rest of the project flows smoothly. If we make mistakes here, we'll be solving problems for months." The foundation crew worked with the efficiency of people who had completed similar projects dozens of times, but Elena and Michael monitored every aspect of the work to ensure it met the specifications that would support the building's complex systems. It was Michael's first experience with the quality control requirements of large construction projects, and he began to understand why Elena had emphasized the importance of attention to detail during their initial conversations. As the foundation work progressed, Michael found himself spending more time on the construction site, becoming familiar with the rhythm of large-scale construction and the coordination requirements that would become central to his role as the project advanced. He learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when work was proceeding smoothly versus when problems were developing beneath the surface of apparent progress. Elena's management style during this phase was hands-on but not micromanaging, involving herself in critical decisions, while allowing the individual contractors to handle their specialized responsibilities. She was present for the important moments, available for consultation when problems arose, and consistently focused on the overall success of the project rather than the details of individual tasks. "You're learning to see the project as a whole system," she observed during one of their morning planning sessions. "That's the difference between being a skilled craftsman and being a construction professional. Both are valuable, but they require different kinds of thinking." Michael was beginning to understand the truth of her observation. His handyman work had focused on solving specific problems for individual customers, requiring technical skills and customer service abilities. The construction project required those same technical skills, but applied them within a complex system where every decision affected multiple other aspects of the work. The third week brought the first major coordination challenge when the plumbing contractor discovered that the building's planned water pressure would require modifications to the municipal water connection that hadn't been anticipated during the design phase. The problem was similar to the electrical issue from the first week, but it required coordination with different city departments and had different implications for the project timeline. Michael watched Alina handle this second crisis with the same calm efficiency she had shown during the electrical problem, but he was beginning to understand that his role in the project wasn't just to observe her problem-solving approach. She was gradually involving him in the decision-making process, asking for his input on solutions and including him in the conversations with contractors and city officials. "What do you think about the timeline implications?" she asked as they reviewed the water pressure modifications with the plumbing contractor. Michael studied the proposed solutions, thinking about how the plumbing changes would affect the electrical and HVAC work he would be coordinating. "The modifications will delay the plumbing rough-in by about a week, but if we can get the electrical work started during that time, we can make up some of the delay during the coordination phase." Alina nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. You're starting to think about how the different systems interact with each other, which is essential for managing complex projects. The solution required coordination with the city's water department, modifications to the building's plumbing specifications, and adjustments to the project timeline. But again, it was manageable within the overall project parameters, and the way Alina involved Michael in developing the solution gave him confidence that he was becoming a genuine contributor to the project's success rather than just an observer of other people's expertise. As the foundation work neared completion, Michael began preparing for the phase of the project that would require his most intensive involvement. The interior systems work would begin in 2 weeks, and he would be responsible for coordinating electrical, plumbing, and VEC installations across 4 floors of residential units and commercial space. It was the kind of responsibility that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, but the gradual progression of his involvement in the project had prepared him for work that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his professional capabilities. Alina had structured his involvement in the project carefully, allowing him to observe and learn during the early phases while gradually increasing his responsibility as his understanding of large construction projects developed. It was a teaching approach that recognized the difference between knowing how to do specific tasks and understanding how those tasks fit into larger systems and processes. "You're ready for the next phase," she told him as they reviewed the specifications. "For the interior systems work, you understand the technical requirements, you've built relationships with the contractors, and you've learned to think about coordination and scheduling in ways that will make the work go smoothly." Michael felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied new challenges, but he also felt confidence that came from careful preparation and gradual skill development. The handyman work had given him technical competence and problem-solving abilities. The test project had taught him about coordination and communication. The foundation phase had shown him how large projects managed complexity and maintained quality standards. "I'm ready," he said, meaning it more completely than he had ever meant it before. The interior systems work began with a coordination meeting that brought together all the contractors, who would be working simultaneously on different aspects of the building's infrastructure. Michael led the meeting, using agenda and communication protocols he had developed during the preparation phase. The meeting covered scheduling requirements, quality standards, safety protocols, and the coordination mechanisms that would ensure the different systems were installed efficiently and correctly. Alina observed the meeting from the back of the room, taking notes but allowing Michael to manage the discussion and decision-making. Her presence was supportive but not intrusive, and Michael felt the particular satisfaction that came from successfully managing a complex professional situation while knowing that someone he respected was evaluating his performance. The electrical contractor was impressed by the thoroughness of Michael's preparation and the clarity of his communication about scheduling and coordination requirements. The plumbing specialist appreciated the attention to detail in the specifications and the recognition of potential conflicts between different systems. The HVAC team was pleased by the realistic timeline that allowed for proper installation without rushing through critical connections. This is the kind of coordination meeting that makes projects successful, the electrical contractor said as the meeting concluded. It's clear that someone has thought carefully about how all the pieces fit together. Michael felt the satisfaction of successful professional performance, but he also recognized that the meeting was just the beginning of a coordination challenge that would require sustained attention and problem-solving over the following months. The success of the interior systems work would depend on his ability to maintain communication, anticipate problems, and adapt to the inevitable challenges that arose during complex construction projects. Elena approached him after the other contractors had left, her expression indicating both approval and awareness that the real test was just beginning. "Well done. You managed that meeting like someone who has been coordinating large projects for years." "I had good preparation," Michael replied, though he was beginning to understand that his success was also based on skills he had developed over years of smaller projects and the confidence that came from Elena's systematic approach to involving him in increasingly complex responsibilities. "You had good preparation, but you also have the instincts for this kind of work," Elena said. "Not everyone can coordinate multiple contractors and technical systems simultaneously. It requires a particular kind of thinking and communication ability." The first week of interior systems work proceeded smoothly, with electrical, plumbing, and VIC installations progressing according to the coordinated schedule Michael had developed. He spent his days moving between different areas of the building, monitoring progress, solving coordination problems, and maintaining communication with contractors who were working on interconnected systems. The work was demanding but engaging, requiring him to use technical knowledge, communication skills, and problem-solving abilities simultaneously. He found himself thinking about coordination challenges during his evening planning sessions, developing solutions to problems that hadn't yet occurred, and building relationships with contractors who were beginning to view him as a skilled professional, rather than someone who was learning on the job. Sarah noticed the change in his energy and focus during their evening conversations. Instead of the tired satisfaction that had characterized his handyman work, he displayed the engaged exhaustion of someone who was being challenged by work that demanded growth and learning. She listened to his descriptions of coordination, challenges, and technical problems with the attention of someone who was beginning to understand that her father's professional development was opening new possibilities for their future. "It sounds like you're really good at this," she said one evening as they worked together on her homework. "I think I am," Michael replied, surprised by his own confidence. "It's different from the handyman work, but it uses a lot of the same skills in new ways. And you like it?" Michael considered the question carefully. The work was more demanding than anything he had done before, but it was also more engaging and more significant. He was part of a team that was building something important, using skills that challenged him to grow beyond his current limitations, working with people who respected his contributions and shared his commitment to quality and reliability. "I like it," he said. "It's the kind of work that makes me want to get up early and tackle whatever problems come up during the day." The second week of interior systems work brought the first major coordination challenge when the FIA contractor discovered that the building's planned heating and cooling system would require modifications to the electrical capacity that hadn't been anticipated during the design phase. The problem required immediate coordination between the electrical and HVAC contractors, modifications to the building's electrical system, and adjustments to the installation schedule. Michael handled the crisis with the calm efficiency he had learned from watching Elena manage similar problems during the foundation phase. He organized a meeting with the affected contractors, reviewed the technical requirements for the system modifications, and developed a solution that would resolve the problem without significantly impacting the overall project timeline. Elena observed his management of the crisis from a distance, available for consultation if needed, but allowing him to handle the problem-solving and coordination responsibilities. Her confidence in his abilities was evident, but she also monitored the situation carefully to ensure that the solution was technically sound and practically feasible. "You handled that well," she said after the contractors had agreed on a solution and adjusted their schedules accordingly. "Crisis management is one of the most important skills for construction coordination, and you're developing good instincts for it." Michael felt the satisfaction of successful problem-solving, but he also recognized that the crisis had tested his ability to manage complex situations under pressure. The success of the solution would depend on his ability to monitor the implementation and ensure that the modifications were completed correctly and on schedule. The resolution required 2 additional days of electrical work and coordination with the Vavik installation, but it was manageable within the overall project timeline. More importantly, the way Michael handled the crisis demonstrated to Elena and the other contractors that he was becoming a skilled professional who could be trusted with significant responsibilities. As the interior systems work progressed, Michael found himself increasingly involved in the strategic planning aspects of the project. Elena included him in meetings with the general contractor, asked for his input on scheduling and coordination decisions, and gradually transferred more responsibility for the day-to-day management of the interior systems work. "You're becoming an essential part of the project," she observed during one of their weekly planning sessions. "The contractors trust your judgment, the scheduling is working smoothly, and the quality of work is meeting our standards." Michael felt the particular satisfaction that came from recognition of professional competence, but he also understood that his success was based on skills he had developed over years of smaller projects and the systematic approach to learning that Elena had provided. The transition from handyman to construction professional hadn't happened overnight, but it had happened more rapidly than he had thought possible. The 3rd week brought the installation of the building's main electrical panel and the coordination of electrical connections throughout the residential and commercial spaces. Michael's role during this phase was central to the project's success, requiring him to coordinate with multiple electrical contractors, ensure that the installations met code requirements, and maintain communication with other contractors whose work depended on the electrical system's completion. The work was complex and demanding, but Michael approached it with the confidence that came from careful preparation and systematic skill development. He had learned to read electrical blueprints, understand code requirements, and coordinate with inspectors and contractors who were working on interconnected systems. Elena observed his management of the electrical installation with the attention of someone who was evaluating his readiness for even greater responsibilities. The electrical work was critical to the project's success, and Michael's ability to coordinate the installation successfully would determine whether he was ready for the leadership role she was beginning to envision for him. "The electrical work is the foundation for everything else," she explained as they reviewed the installation progress. "If we get this right, the rest of the interior systems work will proceed smoothly. If we have problems here, they'll cascade through the entire project." Michael understood the importance of the electrical installation, but he also felt confident in his ability to manage the coordination requirements successfully. The contractors were experienced and reliable, the specifications were clear and technically sound, and the coordination protocols he had developed were working effectively. The electrical installation was completed on schedule and within budget, with quality work that met all code requirements and provided the foundation for the other interior systems. Michael's coordination of the work was recognized by the contractors and inspectors as professional and effective, and Elena's evaluation of his performance was clearly positive. "You've proven that you can handle complex coordination responsibilities," she said as they reviewed the completed electrical work. I'm impressed by your ability to manage multiple contractors and technical systems simultaneously. The success of the electrical installation marked a turning point in Michael's involvement in the project. Elena began including him in meetings with investors and city officials, asked for his input on strategic decisions about the project's development, and gradually transferred more responsibility for the overall management of the interior systems work. I'm thinking about expanding Rodriguez Construction's capacity to handle multiple large projects simultaneously, she said during one of their planning sessions. Would you be interested in taking on a leadership role in that expansion? Michael felt the particular excitement that came with recognition of professional competence and the opportunity for career growth that would challenge him to develop new skills and capabilities. The question represented more than just a job offer. It was an invitation to become part of Elena's vision for building a construction company that could handle the most complex and significant projects in the region. I'm interested, he said, meaning it completely. What kind of leadership role are you thinking about? Elena smiled, clearly pleased by his response. I'm thinking about a role that would combine your technical skills with your coordination abilities. Someone who could manage the interior systems work on multiple projects simultaneously, train other contractors in coordination protocols, and help expand our capacity to handle larger and more complex projects. The conversation continued late into the evening, with Elena outlining her vision for the company's expansion and Michael asking questions about the responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities that would come with a leadership role in a growing construction company. By the time they finished talking, both of them understood that they were discussing more than just a business relationship. They were planning a partnership that would combine their complementary skills and shared commitment to building something significant and lasting. The interior systems work continued to progress smoothly, with Michael's coordination and Elena's oversight ensuring that the electrical, plumbing, and vac installations were completed according to schedule and quality standards. The project was approaching the halfway point, and the building was beginning to take shape as a complex that would serve the community for decades, while establishing Rodriguez Construction as a company capable of handling the most ambitious projects in the region. Michael's role in the project had evolved from observer to coordinator to leader, and he was beginning to understand that his professional development was opening possibilities he had never imagined when he first started his handyman business. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been systematic and supported by Elena's commitment to developing his capabilities while challenging him to grow beyond his current limitations. As the work week ended, Michael drove home with the satisfaction of someone who had found work that challenged him to become more than he had thought possible. The construction site was transforming into something significant. His skills were developing in ways that opened new career possibilities, and his relationship with Elena was evolving from professional collaboration into something deeper and more meaningful. Sarah was waiting for him with homework questions and stories about her day at school, but she was also beginning to understand that her father's work was changing in ways that would affect their lives in positive and significant ways. She listened to his descriptions of the project's progress with the attention of someone who was proud of her father's professional accomplishments and excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. The future felt full of potential, and Michael was ready to meet it with the confidence that came from proven competence and the support of someone who believed in his ability to achieve more than he had ever imagined possible. The August heat pressed down on the construction site like a physical weight, transforming the partially completed building into a furnace that tested the endurance of everyone working on the project. Michael arrived each morning before dawn, not just to avoid the worst of the heat, but because the coordination requirements of the interior systems work had expanded beyond what any normal workday could contain. The residential units were taking shape on the upper floors, while the commercial spaces below required entirely different approaches to electrical and mechanical systems. creating a complexity that demanded constant attention and adaptation. Elena had been spending more time on the construction site as well, but Michael noticed that her presence had acquired a different quality over the past month. Where she had once observed his work with the careful attention of someone evaluating his capabilities, she now moved through the project with the easy confidence of someone who trusted his judgment completely. She consulted with him on technical decisions that affected multiple systems, included him in conversations with investors and city officials, and gradually shifted more responsibility for day-to-day operations to his oversight. The change in their working relationship had been so gradual that Michael hadn't fully recognized it until the morning when Elena asked him to represent Rodriguez construction at a meeting with the city's building inspector while she handled a crisis with another project across town. The responsibility was significant, requiring him to answer questions about code compliance, defend design decisions, and ensure that the inspection process didn't create delays that would cascade through the project timeline. "You know this building better than anyone except the architects," Elena had said, handing him the inspection documents and permits. "I trust your judgment completely, and the inspector knows your work meets our standards." Michael had handled the inspection successfully, but the experience had forced him to recognize that his role in the project had evolved far beyond what either of them had originally envisioned. He was no longer just coordinating interior systems work. He was functioning as Elena's partner in managing the most complex aspects of the construction process. The realization was both exciting and unsettling, opening possibilities he hadn't considered while raising questions about what kind of future he was building with Rodriguez Construction. The commercial spaces presented coordination challenges that tested every skill Michael had developed during his months on the project. Unlike the residential units, which followed standardized patterns that could be replicated efficiently, each commercial space had unique requirements for electrical capacity, climate control, and specialized systems that would support different types of businesses. The restaurant space needed industrial-grade kitchen equipment connections. The retail spaces required flexible lighting and display systems, and the office suites demanded sophisticated telecommunications infrastructure. Michael found himself working closely with Elena to solve problems that required both technical expertise and business judgment. They spent long hours reviewing specifications, consulting with specialty contractors, and developing solutions that would meet the complex requirements while maintaining the project timeline and budget constraints. The work was demanding but deeply satisfying, requiring him to use every aspect of his professional development while learning new approaches to managing large-scale construction challenges. "You're thinking like a developer now," Elena observed during one of their evening planning sessions. "Not just solving technical problems, but understanding how those solutions affect the long-term value and functionality of the building." Michael had begun to understand the truth of her observation. His handyman work had focused on fixing immediate problems for individual customers, but the construction project required him to think about how current decisions would affect the building's performance and profitability over decades. It was a different kind of problem-solving, one that demanded broader perspective and deeper understanding of how buildings functioned as both technical systems and business investments. The coordination challenges intensified as multiple systems reached completion simultaneously. The electrical work was finished on 3 floors, while the plumbing installations were being completed on 2 others, and the AVEC system was being tested and balanced throughout the building. Michael's days became a constant movement between different areas of the construction site, monitoring progress, solving coordination conflicts, and maintaining communication with contractors who were working under increasing time pressure as co-coaching. The project approached critical completion deadlines. Elena's confidence in his abilities was evident in the way she delegated responsibility for increasingly complex decisions. She asked him to negotiate scheduling conflicts with contractors, approve change orders that affected multiple systems, and represent Rodriguez Construction in meetings with suppliers and specialty vendors. The responsibilities were significant, but Michael approached them with the confidence that came from months of successful performance and Elena's consistent support for his professional development. The relationship between them had begun to shift in ways that extended beyond their professional collaboration. Michael noticed that their planning sessions often continued long after the technical discussions were finished, evolving into conversations about their backgrounds, their goals, and their perspectives on building careers that balanced ambition with personal values. Elena shared stories about growing up in her father's construction business, watching him build a reputation for reliability while limiting his growth to maintain personal control over every project. "I respect what my father accomplished," she said during one of these conversations, "but I also saw how his unwillingness to delegate and expand limited what the company could achieve. I want to build something larger and more significant, but I also want to do it with people who share my commitment to quality and integrity." Michael understood that her words carried implications beyond general business philosophy. She was describing a vision for Rodriguez Construction that included him as a key partner, someone who could help expand the company's capacity while maintaining the standards that had built their reputation. The possibility was both exciting and daunting, representing career growth beyond anything he had imagined when he first started his handyman business. Their conversations revealed that they shared similar values about the importance of work that made meaningful contributions to the community, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, and the challenge of building something lasting and significant. Michael found himself looking forward to these discussions as much as the technical aspects of the construction project, recognizing that Elena was someone who understood his perspective on balancing professional ambition with personal responsibilities. Sarah had begun to notice the change in her father's energy and focus during their evening conversations about the day's work. Instead of the straightforward descriptions of completed tasks that had characterized his handyman projects, his accounts of the construction work were filled with strategic thinking, collaboration challenges, and the satisfaction of being part of something significant and complex. "It sounds like you and Elena work really well together," Sarah observed one evening as they prepared dinner together. "We do," Michael replied, recognizing that his daughter's comment touched on something he had been thinking about but hadn't fully articulated. "She's taught me a lot about managing large projects, and I think I've been able to contribute skills that complement hers. Do you think you'll keep working together after this project is finished?" Michael paused, considering the question that had been occupying more of his thoughts as the project approached completion. "I think we might. She's talked about expanding the company to handle multiple large projects, and I think I could contribute to that kind of growth." Sarah nodded with the seriousness she brought to all important topics. "That sounds like it would be good for both of you." The project entered its final phase with the installation of finishing systems and the coordination of final inspections that would determine whether the building was ready for occupancy. Michael's role during this phase was critical, requiring him to ensure that all systems were functioning properly, that final details met specification requirements, and that the transition from construction to occupancy proceeded smoothly. Elena's trust in his capabilities was evident in the way she handled this crucial phase of the project. Instead of increasing her oversight as the deadline approached, she gave him greater autonomy to manage the final coordination requirements while she focused on the business aspects of preparing the building for its first tenants. The division of responsibilities felt natural and effective, combining their complementary skills to ensure that both the technical and business aspects of the project were managed successfully. The first commercial tenant was a local cafe owner who had been waiting for months to move into the restaurant space on the building's ground floor. Michael worked directly with her contractor to ensure that the specialized kitchen equipment was installed properly and that all systems were functioning according to the specifications she needed for her business operations. The work required careful coordination with the building's electrical and plumbing systems, but it also provided the satisfaction of seeing the space transformed into something that would serve the community for years to come. Elena observed his management of the tenant coordination with obvious approval, but Michael sensed that she was also evaluating how he handled the customer service aspects of the work. The cafe owner was demanding but fair, asking detailed questions about system capacities and maintenance requirements, while expressing appreciation for the quality of work that had gone into preparing her space. "You handled that perfectly," Elena said after the cafe owner had signed off on the completed work. "She's going to be an excellent reference for attracting other commercial tenants, and that's partly because you made sure she understood exactly what she was getting and how to maintain it properly." The residential units presented different challenges as the first families began moving into the completed apartments. Michael found himself troubleshooting minor issues with electrical outlets and plumbing fixtures, problems that were normal for any new construction, but required immediate attention to ensure tenant satisfaction. The work drew on skills he had developed during his handyman years, but it also required him to think about how individual problems reflected on the overall quality of the construction project. Elena accompanied him on several of these service calls, not to supervise his work, but to observe how he interacted with the new residents and handled their concerns. Michael approached each issue with the patient professionalism he had learned during years of customer service work, explaining what had caused the problem, how he was fixing it, and what residents could do to prevent similar issues in the future. "You're a natural at this," Elena said after they had resolved a minor electrical issue for a family with young children. "Most contractors treat service calls as inconveniences, but you understand that tenant satisfaction is essential for the long-term success of the building." The project was officially completed in late September, with all systems functioning properly, all inspections passed, and all residential and commercial spaces ready for occupancy. The completion represented the successful conclusion of the most complex construction project in Cedar Falls' recent history, establishing Rodriguez Construction as a company capable of handling major developments, while delivering quality work within budget and schedule constraints. Michael felt the particular satisfaction that came from contributing to something significant and lasting. But he also recognized that the project's completion marked a transition point in his professional development. Over 8 months, he had evolved from a handyman contractor to a construction professional, capable of managing complex coordination requirements and working as Elena's partner in building something meaningful and substantial. Elena organized a completion celebration that brought together all the contractors, suppliers, and professionals who had contributed to the project's success. The event was held in the building's main commercial space, with catering provided by the cafe that would soon open on the ground floor. Michael found himself moving through the crowd as Elena's co-host, sharing credit for the project's success and discussing future opportunities with contractors who had worked with them throughout the construction process. "I couldn't have done this without you," Elena said during a quiet moment between conversations with contractors and city officials. "Your technical skills and coordination abilities were essential, but more than that, you understood the vision for what we were building and helped make it a reality." Michael felt the warmth of recognition for professional accomplishment, but he also sensed that Elena's words carried implications for future collaboration that extended beyond the completed project. They had worked together successfully on something significant, and both of them understood that their partnership had the potential to achieve even more ambitious goals. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a representative from the Regional Development Authority, who had been following the project's progress as a potential model for other communities in the area. She was interested in discussing future projects that might benefit from Rodriguez Construction's approach to managing complex developments, and she specifically mentioned Michael's coordination work as an example of the kind of professional expertise that made large projects successful. We're always looking for construction companies that can handle multiple large projects simultaneously, she explained to Elena and Michael. Your work on this development demonstrates exactly the kind of capability we need for the projects we're planning over the next few years. Elena and Michael exchanged glances, recognizing that the conversation represented exactly the kind of opportunity they had been preparing for. Through their work on the mixed-use development, the possibility of multiple large projects would require them to expand their operation significantly, but it would also establish Rodriguez Construction as a major player in regional development work. We'd be very interested in discussing those opportunities, Elena replied, her voice carrying the controlled excitement of someone who recognized a significant business possibility. We've been planning to expand our capacity to handle multiple projects, and we have the team and expertise to deliver quality work on the scale you're describing. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering the scope of potential projects, timeline requirements, and the kind of partnership that might develop between Rodriguez Construction and the Regional Development Authority. Michael found himself contributing technical insights and coordination perspectives that complemented Elena's business development approach, and he began to understand that their partnership was already functioning at a level that could support significant expansion. As the celebration wound down and contractors began to leave, Michael and Elena found themselves alone in the completed commercial space, surrounded by the evidence of 8 months of successful collaboration. The building was quiet but felt alive with potential, ready to serve families and businesses while standing as proof of what could be accomplished through careful planning, skilled execution, and effective partnership. So what do you think? Elena asked, her voice carrying both satisfaction with what they had accomplished and anticipation for what might come next. Are you ready to help me build something even bigger? Michael looked around the space they had helped create, thinking about the challenges they had overcome together, the skills he had developed, and the satisfaction of work that made meaningful contributions to the community. The opportunity to expand Rodriguez Construction represented professional growth beyond anything he had imagined when he first started his handyman business, but it also felt like a natural progression of the partnership they had been building. Throughout the project, "I'm ready," he said, meaning it completely. "Let's see how big we can build this." The conversation that followed lasted well into the evening, covering their plans for expanding Rodriguez Construction's capacity, the kind of projects they wanted to pursue, and the partnership structure that would support their shared vision for building a construction company capable of handling the most significant developments in the region. They discussed hiring additional coordinators, establishing relationships with specialized contractors, and developing the business systems that would allow them to manage multiple large projects simultaneously. As they talked, Michael began to understand that their partnership was based on more than just complementary professional skills. They shared similar values about the importance of quality work, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, and the commitment to building something lasting and meaningful. The professional collaboration had evolved into something deeper and more personal, a relationship that combined mutual respect, shared ambition, and genuine affection. The evening ended with them standing together in the building's main entrance, looking out at the Cedar Falls downtown area that would be transformed by future projects they might build together. The mixed-use development was completed and successful, but it also represented the beginning of something larger and more ambitious. Elena turned to face him, her expression serious but warm. "I want you to know that this isn't just about business. For me, working with you over these months has been one of the most satisfying professional experiences of my career, but it's also been personally meaningful in ways I didn't expect." Michael felt the truth of her words resonating with his own experience of their collaboration. The professional partnership had indeed become something more personal, though neither of them had acknowledged it directly until this moment. "I feel the same way. This project challenged me to grow professionally, But working with you has also been personally rewarding in ways that go beyond the technical aspects of construction." They stood together in comfortable silence, both understanding that their relationship had reached a point where personal and professional feelings were intertwined in ways that would affect their future decisions about business partnership and personal connection. The completed building surrounded them like evidence of what they could accomplish together, while the possibility of future projects represented challenges that would require both professional collaboration and personal trust. The future felt full of potential, both for Rodriguez Construction's expansion and for the relationship between Elena and Michael that had developed alongside their professional partnership. They had proven that they could work together successfully on complex projects, but they were also beginning to understand that their connection extended beyond business into territory that was both exciting and uncertain. As they prepared to leave the completed building, both of them understood that the next phase of their relationship would require decisions about how to balance professional partnership with personal feelings, how to expand their business collaboration, while exploring the deeper connection that had developed between them over months of shared challenges and mutual respect. The mixed-use development stood as proof of what they could accomplish together professionally, but the more complex question of what they might build together personally remained to be explored in the weeks and months ahead. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in October, just as Michael was reviewing blueprints for Rodriguez Construction's second major project. Elena answered with her usual professional tone, but Michael could hear the shift in her voice as the conversation progressed from routine business inquiry to something that demanded immediate attention. When she hung up, her expression carried the weight of opportunity mixed with complexity that he had learned to recognize as the hallmark of significant decisions. "That was Morrison Development Group from Chicago," she said, setting down her phone with deliberate care. "They want Rodriguez Construction to partner with them on a multi-phase commercial development project. Shopping centers, office complexes, mixed-use developments across 3 states over the next 2 years. Michael felt the familiar surge of excitement that accompanied major opportunities, but he also sensed underlying tension in Elena's manner that suggested the conversation had involved more than just business proposals. "That sounds like exactly the kind of expansion we've been planning for. What's the challenge?" Elena moved to the window of their newly established office, looking out at the completed mixed-use development that had established their reputation for handling complex projects. "The challenge is that they want me to relocate to Chicago to oversee the partnership. Morrison Development is offering to make Rodriguez Construction a subsidiary of their operation, with me as regional director for all their Midwest projects." The implications of her words settled over Michael like cold water. The opportunity represented everything Elena had worked toward: recognition as a major player in commercial development, financial security beyond anything her father's modest construction business had achieved, and the chance to build projects that would shape communities across multiple states. It was also an opportunity that would take her away from Cedar Falls, away from the partnership they had built, and away from the personal connection that had been growing alongside their professional collaboration. "When would this start?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice neutral while processing the reality that their partnership might be ending just as it was reaching its full potential. "They want an answer by the end of the week, and if I accept, they'd want me in Chicago by the beginning of December." Elena turned from the window to face him directly. "It's an incredible opportunity, Mike. The kind of career advancement that construction professionals spend their entire lives working toward." Michael nodded, understanding that she was sharing the news with him, not just as a business partner, but as someone whose opinion mattered to her, in ways that extended beyond professional considerations. "It sounds like an opportunity you'd be foolish to pass up." "That's what I keep telling myself," Elena said, but her voice lacked the enthusiasm that usually accompanied her discussions of business growth and expansion possibilities. Morrison Development has the resources to fund projects that would take Rodriguez Construction decades to achieve independently. Working with them would give me access to the kind of large-scale development work I've always wanted to do. The conversation continued through the morning as they reviewed the details of Morrison's offer and discussed the implications for their current projects and future plans. Elena had built Rodriguez Construction into a company capable of handling major developments, and the partnership with Morrison represented validation of everything she had accomplished while opening doors to opportunities that exceeded anything available in their regional market. Michael found himself in the complex position of supporting Elena's career advancement while recognizing that her success would fundamentally change the professional and personal relationship they had been building. He understood that true partnership sometimes required supporting decisions that were personally difficult, and he was determined to help Elena make the choice that was best for her long-term goals rather than the one that was most convenient for their current collaboration. "What does your father think about the Morrison offer?" Michael asked, knowing that Elena's relationship with her father's legacy and expectations had always been central to her business decisions. "He's proud that Rodriguez Construction has grown to the point where major developers are interested in partnership, but he's also concerned about losing the family identity that took him 30 years to build." Elena smiled ruefully. "He said I should follow my own judgment, but I know he's hoping I'll find a way to expand the business without giving up control to outside investors." The weight of family expectations added another layer of complexity to Elena's decision. She had spent years working to expand Rodriguez Construction beyond her father's conservative approach to business growth. But the Morrison offer represented a level of external partnership that might compromise the independence and local focus that had been central to her father's vision for the company. Over the following days, Michael watched Elena wrestle with the decision while maintaining her usual professional efficiency in managing their current projects. She researched Morrison Development's track record, consulted with lawyers about the partnership terms, and spent long hours reviewing financial projections that demonstrated the tremendous growth potential of accepting their offer. But he also noticed that she seemed less enthusiastic about the FIO opportunity than he would have expected for someone receiving the career advancement she had always sought. Their conversations during this period took on a different quality, moving beyond the technical and strategic discussions that had characterized their professional partnership to explore questions about personal goals, family obligations, and the balance between ambition and satisfaction with meaningful work. Michael found himself sharing perspectives about his own career transitions, the challenges of single parenthood, and the unexpected satisfaction he had found in work that challenged him to grow beyond his original limitations. "Sometimes I think the biggest opportunities are the ones that scare us most," Elena said during one of their evening planning sessions. "This Morrison partnership represents everything I thought I wanted, but it also means giving up the control and independence that made Rodriguez Construction successful in the first place." Michael understood that her uncertainty reflected deeper questions about what kind of success would be most fulfilling for her long-term goals. The Morrison offer represented financial security and professional recognition, but it also required significant personal sacrifices and changes to the business philosophy that had guided her career development. "What would you do if money wasn't a factor?" he asked. "If you could design your ideal career without worrying about financial constraints or external expectations?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I think I'd want to continue building Rodriguez Construction as an independent company, taking on challenging projects that make meaningful contributions to communities, working with people I respect and trust." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "I think I'd want to continue the partnership we've been building, expanding it to handle larger projects while maintaining the values and standards that made our collaboration successful." Her words carried implications that extended beyond business strategy, touching on the personal connection that had been developing alongside their professional partnership. Michael felt the truth of her statement resonating with his own feelings about their collaboration, recognizing that their work together had become more satisfying and meaningful than either of them had anticipated when they first began working together. The deadline for responding to Morrison development arrived with Elena still uncertain about her decision. She had spent the week reviewing every aspect of the opportunity, consulting with advisors, and exploring alternative approaches to expanding Rodriguez Construction's capacity for handling large projects. But the decision ultimately came down to personal values and priorities that couldn't be resolved through financial analysis or strategic planning. "I've made my decision," she announced when Michael arrived at the office on Friday morning. "I'm going to decline Morrison's offer and focus on building Rodriguez Construction as an independent company." Michael felt relief and excitement at her decision, but he also understood that declining such a significant opportunity required courage and commitment to a vision that was less certain but more personally meaningful. "What convinced you to turn it down?" "Several things," Elena said, settling into her chair with the relaxed posture of someone who had resolved a difficult decision. "But mainly the realization that what we've built together over the past year is exactly what I want to continue building. The Morrison partnership would have given me access to larger projects, but it would have required giving up the independence and collaborative approach that made our work satisfying." Her decision opened possibilities for expanding their partnership in ways that would allow them to pursue larger projects while maintaining control over their business, philosophy, and working relationships. Elena had already begun researching alternative approaches to funding and managing multi-project operations, exploring options that would allow Rodriguez Construction to grow without sacrificing the values that had made their collaboration successful. "I've been thinking about formalizing our partnership," she continued, "making you a full partner in Rodriguez Construction rather than a contractor or coordinator. What would you think about that?" The offer represented recognition of Michael's contributions to the company's success and invitation to share in building something larger and more ambitious than either of them could achieve independently. It was also acknowledgement that their professional collaboration had evolved into a relationship based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection that extended beyond business considerations. "I'd be honored to be your partner," Michael said, meaning it completely. "I think we work well together, and I'm excited about what we could accomplish as equal partners in building Rodriguez Construction." The conversation that followed lasted through the afternoon as they discussed the practical details of restructuring their business relationship and the strategic plans for expanding their capacity to handle multiple large projects simultaneously. They talked about hiring additional coordinators, establishing partnerships with specialized contractors, and developing the business systems that would support their growth while maintaining the quality standards and collaborative approach that had made their work successful. As they planned their expanded partnership, Michael and Elena also began to acknowledge the personal feelings that had been developing alongside their professional collaboration. The decision to decline the Morrison offer had been influenced partly by Elena's recognition that her relationship with Michael had become more important to her than the career advancement opportunities available elsewhere. "I want you to know that turning down Morrison wasn't just about business," she said as they concluded their planning session. "Working with you has been personally meaningful in ways that go beyond professional collaboration. I wasn't ready to give up what we've been building together." Michael felt the truth of her words reflecting his own experience of their relationship. The professional partnership had indeed evolved into something deeper and more personal, though both of them had been cautious about acknowledging these feelings while focusing on their business collaboration. "I feel the same way. Our partnership has been professionally rewarding, but it's also been personally fulfilling in ways I didn't expect." The acknowledgement of their mutual feelings marked a turning point in their relationship, opening possibilities for building something together that combined professional partnership with personal connection. They had proven they could work together successfully on complex projects, and they were beginning to explore whether their collaboration could extend into territory that was both exciting and meaningful. Rodriguez Construction's expansion proceeded rapidly over the following months, with Elena and Michael working as equal partners to build a company capable of handling multiple large projects, while maintaining the standards and collaborative approach that had made their initial work successful. They hired experienced coordinators, established relationships with reliable contractors, and developed business systems that supported efficient project management across different locations and timelines. Their first major project as formal partners was a mixed-use development similar to their original collaboration, but larger in scope and more complex in its coordination requirements. Michael's role combined technical oversight with business development, while Elena focused on strategic planning and client relationships. The division of responsibilities felt natural and effective, combining their complementary skills while allowing both of them to contribute to all aspects of the company's operations. Sarah had watched her father's professional and personal development with the attention of someone who understood that significant changes were taking place in their lives. She approved of Elena both as a business partner and as someone who clearly cared about Michael's happiness and success. During family dinners that now often included Elena, Sarah enjoyed hearing about the projects they were building and the challenges they were solving together. "It sounds like you and Elena make a really good team," Sarah observed one evening after Elena had left following a planning session that had extended into dinner. "We do," Michael replied, recognizing that his daughter's comment touched on both the professional and personal aspects of his relationship with Elena. "She's taught me a lot about business and construction, but she's also become someone I care about in ways that go beyond work." Sarah nodded with the wisdom that children sometimes possessed about adult relationships. "I think she cares about you too. And I think she's good for you." The expansion of Rodriguez Construction continued to exceed their expectations, with multiple projects under development and a reputation for quality work that attracted clients from across the region. Michael and Elena's partnership proved effective at every level, combining their technical expertise with complementary business skills while maintaining the collaborative approach that had made their initial work successful. As their business partnership flourished, their personal relationship continued to deepen in ways that felt natural and meaningful to both of them. They shared similar values about work, family, and community, and they found genuine satisfaction in building something together that was both professionally successful and personally fulfilling. The future felt full of possibility for Rodriguez Construction and for the partnership between Elena and Michael that had evolved from professional collaboration into something deeper and more lasting. They had proven they could work together successfully on the most complex projects, and they were discovering that their personal connection was strong enough to support the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Standing together in their shared office one evening, reviewing plans for projects that would shape communities across the region, Michael and Elena both understood that they had built something extraordinary. Rodriguez Construction had become a company capable of handling the most ambitious developments while maintaining the values and standards that made their work meaningful. More importantly, they had discovered that the best partnerships combined professional competence with personal connection, creating relationships that were both productive and fulfilling. Their collaboration had transformed both of their careers, while building something together that was larger and more satisfying than either of them could have achieved independently. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.